Alright, hey Pritzker people. We are here with objective 129. Students will be able to write expressions and equations from word problems. So very similar to objective 128 where we talked about, we had these pretty complicated mathematical or English phrases and we wrote them as mathematical phrases. Now we're going to analyze these word problems and try to write our own equations and expressions from the information given from each one of these problems. One thing Ms. Hyder and I wanted to remind you about is we've noticed a trend in homework where students come in like it looks done, but it wasn't really done well. If you are one of those students who's just skipping through the videos, waiting for the words to pop up and writing them down, you're missing the point entirely. That's not what you're supposed to be doing. This is the direct instruction part of the lesson, as if we were in class. We're just going to use not class time to do that. So if you're not engaging like you would in class, then you are wasting your time. And it's really unfair to all of your group members and all of your classmates who did come in prepared when you're not prepared. So make sure when you're doing these lessons, you're sitting in an isolated area, you're focused, in a space that you could concentrate as if you were actually sitting in class, okay? Because this is a really important part of it. The homework is prep for the day. So make sure you're really digging into these lessons. Make sure you come in with the strong knowledge already. We're looking at problem 1 right here. We have Carlos is trying to read 12 pages of his book a night. The book has 156 pages. How many days will it take him to finish the book? I'm going to remind you of your CUS acronym. I think it's a really helpful way to make sure you're answering the question. At this point in time, you should do this every time, in our opinion, but it's up to you. You know yourself better than we do. If this seems time-consuming and not helpful, it's up to you. But it's going to be kind of like, well, you should have done it if these problems are difficult for you. So first thing, whenever we're going through these word problems, let's start with the question. We're being asked to figure out how many days it's going to take Carlos to finish the book. And now we're going to go through and underline the important information we need to actually answer that question. So he's trying to read 12 pages of his book a night. The book has 156 pages. Now from here, we can actually write an equation. An equation would be better here. We can write an equation to try to figure out, okay, how many pages would he have to read a night? Now you could logically think of it as, okay, that's the total. I could divide by 12 and I would get the number of pages. We feel pretty confident that you all can already do that. But we're trying to get a little more mathematical and a little more algebraic and actually use information to start writing equations, especially with these easier examples to start. So what I'm going to notice is, okay, wants to read 12 pages a night. So I don't know how many nights it's going to take Carlos, but I know like 12 times that value has to equal 156 pages if he wants to finish the book. From there I can set that quantity equal to 156. It's saying 12 times the number of nights, which I don't know, should equal 156 pages. That would mean he has finished reading the book. From here I'm going to divide 12 on both sides. And I get n equal to 13. Last step always, we should finish with a complete sentence because it asks you a complete question. So how many days will it take him to finish the book? And it'll take Carlos 13 days to finish reading his book. Now number 2. Same thing. We're going to start off with our CUS acronym. So I'm not even going to read the whole question this time. I'm going to model out. I'm going to go straight to what are we being asked to figure out here. This is saying find the weight of the package. Okay? So if the weight of the package is multiplied by 5, right away we saw multiplied by 5. So we don't know this weight of the package. I'm just going to label it P. We know that when it's multiplied by 5, the result is 40. Remember that the word is oftentimes means equals, mathematically speaking. It's setting something equal to each other. From here, I hope you recognize this is a pretty easy equation to solve. We have some unknown weight times 5, and that resulting weight is 40. From here, we could divide both sides by 5 Or even just think what times 5 equals 40. 2 ways you can go about it. Regardless, we get P is equal to 8, which is telling us the package weighs 8 pounds. Alright, on problem 3, you should pause the video and try to do this one on your own. We've done the first 2 together. Give it a shot without any help from me. I'm going to walk through it now, so hopefully your answer is going to match what we have now. I'm going to stop doing the CUS acronym. I'm going to walk through it verbally. If that's helpful for you, then you should write it down each time. If I go straight to the question, we're being asked if each person paid $13, then what was their total bill? So I'm trying to find information I need to answer that question of they all paid $13, what was their total bill? At a restaurant, Mike and his 3 friends decided to divide the bill evenly which means they're all going to pay the same amount. If each person paid $13, then what was the total bill? Now, what a lot of students do incorrectly, they go 3 times 13 and they get 39. Because they're thinking, okay, 3 friends, $13, the bill must have been 39. But if you did that, then you forgot about, well, Mike is part of this group. So in total, you really have 4 people. You take the 4 people, multiply it by 13. That should equal the total bill. That would be 42 is equal to the total. So to properly respond to the question, we could say the total bill cost $42. Now, number 5, we get into a little bit tougher type of word problem. It's saying that I like to shop at Sam's Club whenever I'm buying food for school events. Last year, when I was grading out for students who scored 3 points or more, it should be on the ACT. Explore is an older test that I'm not sure if you've taken. I buy 1 pound of hamburger at my regular store, and that costs me $4.75. However, at Sam's Club, I can buy 5 pounds of hamburger for $15. Right, so what's fun about these questions is you don't really need the entire paragraph to answer them. It's important to figure out what information do I need to best respond to this question. This is saying, how much does a pound of hamburger cost at Sam's Club? So I just need the information that's related to Sam's Club to solve this problem. If we look here at Sam's Club, I can buy 5 pounds of hamburger for $15. It's really important as we start to write equations and expressions, any units you have, make sure you keep the units and you very clearly explain them. So I have $15. If I want to figure out how much hamburger costs for just 1 pound, I can take that total amount, those 5 pounds, and by dividing those 2 quantities, I can figure out what is the 1 pound cost of hamburger at Sam's Club. When you do 15 divided by 5, you get $3 for 1 pound. So I can now answer that question. It costs $3 for 1 pound of hamburger at Sam's Club. Now, using that information for part B, I want to figure out how much can I save on each pound of hamburger shopping at Sam's Club versus if I shopped at my regular store. For here, I paid $4.75 at my regular store, and now I know I paid $3 at Sam's Club. This is a simple matter of just, okay, I have my regular store cost, I have my Sam's Club cost. When I subtract those 2 quantities, I get $1.75 saved. by shopping at Sam's Club. Now there's one thing I should have done in this problem. This is a little bit misleading because I'm not saving like $1.75 overall. What I should have included here is I saved $1.75 per pound. I mean, if I'm having a big barbecue, I'm going to buy more than just 1 pound of hamburger. So I'm saving $1.75 per pound or $1.75 per pound saved by shopping at Sam's Club. Alright, we're now on the top of page 48. Here are some hints, some steps that might be helpful when you're going about these word problems. At first, it might be tough to figure out what's my first step. So this list could be a nice guide to figure out how to tackle some of these word problems. The first one, I identify the question or what is unknown. That's similar to our CUS acronym, try to figure out what's being asked to do first. In example 1, Miss Lincoln took some students on a camping trip. If B represents the number of boys, G represents the number of girls, and A represents the number of adults, the total people on the field trip could be written as what? I'm going to circle that last part because that's what I'm being asked to do. Is the total people on the field trip could be written as what? And it said could be written as, so it gives me some choice. I can write an expression or I can write an equation. The difference being one has an equal sign, it's actually equating two things, or just a general expression to represent a quantity. Part 2 is identify all the relationships that have to do with the variable and assign variables to these relationships. This one was kind of nice. It gave us suggested variables. If B represents number of boys, I'm going to set B equal to number of boys. G is equal to your number of girls. And then A equals the number of adults. Part 4 is saying set up a story in your own words. This is what's beautiful about algebra. We can create a story using just these abstract letters to represent a very real-life idea. I'm being asked to figure out the total people on the trip, so I could simply say, okay, well if I add the number of boys, which I don't know, plus the number of girls, plus the number of adults, that would give me the total number of people on this trip. And so now I'm actually going to rewrite using a math sentence. So if I add the number of boys plus girls plus adults, well that should give me the total number of people on this trip. So that could be an acceptable answer for this one. Adding these together, I would figure out the total number of people on this trip. But this one's really cool. You could actually do this as an equation as well. What if I wanted to use a variable for the total number of people? I could add a variable t and say t represents number of total people. And from here I would just need one simple modification. All these added up equals my variable t. It doesn't change the expression, it's still stating that this added together, the number of boys, girls, and adults, should equal the total number of people on this trip. But you see how these hints were a nice little guide to help us figure out, okay, how do I answer this question? For number 2 and 3 on this page, you're going to try it on your own. We're going to skip ahead to number 4 on the next page. That'll be the last example that we do together. Alright, number 4. Pritzker needs to know how many people will be attending the homecoming game on the fan buses/vans. A van that seats 50 people costs $60, and a bus that seats 100 people costs $90. If V represents the number of vans, and B represents the number of buses, the first question we're answering is write an equation. That's really important. I'm going to underline that and draw an equal sign. That's my reminder that I'm going to make an equation, not just an expression. Write an equation that represents the total cost in dollars of V vans and V buses. So this is really interesting. I was given more information than I need to answer this question, because this question is asking just about the total cost of vans and buses. Because I want to figure out the total cost, I don't actually need any information about the number of people. It's saying a van that seats 50 people costs $60, but even if that van had one person on it, it's still going to cost $60. The important part here is the cost. So I'm going to kind of think back to those steps. I'm going to start making a list of what variables I plan to use and kind of writing my own story to go along with this. So I know that V equals number of vans, that B is equal to the number of buses. And again, if I wanted to, I could even make a variable T, saying that T is the total cost of all these vans and buses. And I mentioned it kind of as optional, but this one's to write an equation, so I'm going to need a variable that represents that total. So let's give it a try. The important information I need is just the cost. So let's say, I don't know how many vans I have, but if I had 60 times that number, that should give me the cost of the vans. If I had 3 vans, for example, the 60 times 3 cost me 180. That would be the cost of the vans. Now, if I added that cost to the $90 it costs for a bus, make sure I'm right about that, a bus. Again, this kind of makes sense. 90 times B, if I had 2 buses, it would cost me, again, $180 just for the buses we purchased. This has to be equal to the total. Now, here's a really important part of your equation, and a part of your homework for that matter. We know what this equals. We know what B and T stand for. But the idea in writing these equations is it should be so clear to anybody who reads it, like what exactly is going on. So I'm going to explain what this 60 is. This 60 is saying the cost of a van. This is saying the cost of a bus. Now, we don't need to explain B, T, and V because we already established what they mean over here. Now, take a second and just ask yourself, like, does this math sentence, does this tell the story of what's going on up here? And does it answer this question of, could it represent the total cost? Now, the cool thing is for part B, we're going to prove and test to see does our equation actually make sense. It's saying find the total cost, essentially using your equation, for 3 vans and 4 buses. So if our equation makes sense, if it's logical, then this answer should also make sense as far as how much we should be paying. So I'm going to plug in these suggested values for 3 vans. I put 3 in for my V variable. I'm going to put 4 in for my B, because that's the number of buses we're going to take. And that should be equal to my total. 3 times 60 is 180. 90 times 4 is 360. And if we add these two quantities together, we get $540 for my total cost. And if we think back to our first information, it cost $60 for a van. 60 times 3 is 180. It costs $90 for a bus. 90 times 4 is 360. I think our equation is pretty good. It was able to answer this question. We could have answered it just given the initial information up here. Now, what we need to see for the rest of your homework, we have to see every question you giving meaning to your variables. We have to see you explaining like any coefficients or any constants you have. You need to explain like what that means. And right here, we really should have this as a final complete sentence. The total cost and 4 buses is $540. The last thing that'd be kind of fun and make this more interesting, these types of word problems are always the ones that we struggle on any sort of testing, whether it be ACT or just classroom testing. Time yourself. Make it a little more interesting. Some of these questions are going to be really easy, some will not be so easy, but it'd be curious to know how long does a regular word problem take you, because then when you see these types of problems on an ACT, well, you know exactly how long it's going to take you and how you need to plan your time accordingly from there. So try to use a timer for each of the rest of these. After you finish them, just put your time off to the side. I'm curious, and I hope you are too, how long does it actually take you to answer a standard word problem type question? They're really important. They show up all over any kind of standardized testing. And these are real life questions. At a certain point, math is just a tool to help us explain what's going on in the world. So we need to be able to use this tool effectively in these types of problems. If you have any questions, email your teachers, ask your classmates, and we will see you next time.